Hi everyone, I'm Holly from Handprinted and I'm about to make a blind embossing using some card. Now I've made a video on blind embossing before using inkless lino and putting it through the press to create an embossing, but this time I'm just going to use some card. I've got some grey board here and some mount board, some cardboard. You want anything that's maybe 1 millimeter or thicker. It's going to make a good impression and I'm going to put it through the press. It's a really easy, simple technique if you've got an etching press. No inks involved, so it's a nice clean process and the prints can be really beautiful. I've got an example here of just a really simple couple of shapes cut out of cards and embossed. You can see that lovely texture from the board and the nice crisp edges. They look beautiful as the light hits the paper. So let's make one. Now these can be as simple or as complicated as you like, as you've seen from this example, but this is just some really simple shapes cut out of grey board like this and put through the press to create those impressions. But you can go all out with the design if you'd like to. You can layer your materials. All you want to do is make sure that you've got something in relief, so something that's got high areas and low areas, and then your paper can soften into them and be pushed into them in the press. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of grey board. You can also use mount board for this. So here I have a little assemblage of my card. I've used grey board, which is probably 2 millimeters thick, cut a star out of it. Also got that star as a positive piece as well. I've got some card that I've ripped to get a torn edge. This will probably be really subtle because it's very, very shallow. And I've got a little bit of piece of corrugated card as well. So now I'm ready to assemble them on my press. It's usually necessary when making an embossing to use dampened paper. We want something reasonably thick. You probably want above 200 gram paper. I'm going to try using some Somerset 250 gram satin white paper. Should work really well. You could also use Snowdon 300 gram as another option. I've got it soaking in a water bath and I'm going to blot it with some blotting paper. If you haven't got blotting paper, you can use some J-cloths or some towels just to get the excess water off. We want it soaked because we want the fibres to be lovely and soft and pliable so that they'll push down into these areas that we've created. It's almost like we're making a collograph, but it's disassembled and we're printing inkless. So I've got my things laid out on my press. My paper goes over the top. And I've got a layer of newsprint and my blankets. I'm using the Abig geared press here and I've got the tension really nice and tight on that blanket. You need it to be squeezed through really tight. So here I have my embossing. It's quite tricky to see on camera, but hopefully here you can see my lovely debossed plate marks here. This was the hole, the star-shaped hole that was cut out, so that's embossing out of the front. I've got my subtle lines from the torn paper across here. This is my corrugated card, and this was that cut out star shape there. So I've got nice crisp embossing there, some crisp embossing here, and some subtle texture from those other paper materials. This is a really easy technique to have a go at if you've got access to an etching press. Get some paper in to soak, gather some different materials and see what you get. You can experiment with all sorts of different flat materials. Just make sure that anything is suitable to put through the press. You don't want anything too sharp, anything that can damage your press or its blankets. If you're not getting an embossing that's very strong, it may be that you need thicker materials or more pressure on the press. If your objects start to cut through the paper or tear, it may be that your pressure is too tight or the objects are too sharp and not really suitable to go through the press. Have fun experimenting with this technique. Happy printing!